Okay, first things first for this part. We need something for the examples I'm about to share. So I have drawn right here for you the Mona Lisa. Clearly, just play with me for a second here. As you've no doubt figured out by now, my artistic ability is rather limited. You could try and produce artistry out of me as much as you want, and you wouldn't get a whole lot. But play with me for a minute. We'll think about this as Mona Lisa. Now, this approach that I'm talking about now within the production of culture approach is this idea of art worlds. The sociologist connected with this is a guy named Howard Becker, writing in the 1970s. And Howard Becker makes the very, what seems like obvious point, which we actually think about it, as I'll do with you right now, but the rather kind of fascinating point that art, for example, the Mona Lisa, is not just the result of an independent genius author, but is actually the result of a network of people and forces, most of whom get absolutely no credit for the final piece of work that is produced. Now let me go into this a little bit more. When we think about the Mona Lisa, we think Leonardo da Vinci, right? And we kind of subscribe to what you could call the great man or the great artist theory of how art comes to be, which is that da Vinci, in the course of his life, has a really interesting idea, thinks to himself, I'm going to paint the Mona Lisa. Comes over, paints the Mona Lisa, and voila, we have a piece of art. So it's a sense that there's one person, it's a focus on genius and idea of that person, and then we have the piece of art. Now, the art worlds approach does not deny the fact that Da Vinci had talent and had an idea, had some sort of sense of what he wanted to make the Mona Lisa to be. But it looks very closely at all the conditions that go into producing this piece of art. And let me just list a few, for example. You need material to produce the Mona Lisa, which means you need paint, which in Da Vinci's day was quite difficult to get different colors and to actually have all the kind of palette that he wanted to make. You need canvas, and actually there's some evidence that a new Da Vinci painting was actually made on vellum, which is a different type of material, but then nonetheless you need some sort of piece of material. You need wood or other material for the frame. Okay, so we've kind of gotten started there. But we've asked no questions about Da Vinci himself. In other words, how did he come to be such a great artist? Artistry doesn't just appear out of nowhere. As we know, to be who we want to be and to fully cultivate our skills and talents as a human takes a whole heck of a lot of work. Hold on one second. So Da Vinci, this art worlds approach, it would look at material, but it would also look at something like training. And so it would ask, well, for Da Vinci to be good, he might need to go to art school, though I think, as a point of fact, Da Vinci himself didn't go to art school, but a lot of artists did, though I'm not sure about that by Da Vinci. You oftentimes, specifically in Da Vinci's era, needed a patron. So this is somebody that would shell out the money so you could buy these products, but also basically buy your time. So you didn't have to be busy baking bread or feeding the horses or something in order to make money to feed yourself. You could be just doing art, because even into the present day, it's incredibly hard to make a living as an artist, right? There aren't lots of clear markets for the remuneration of artistic ability. Instead, the classic kind of stereotype of the struggling or starving artist, it's there for a reason, which is that producing art does not immediately lead to money, which brings us to the next point, that you need at some level kind of a market, right? You need some forces that make your art popular. So for example, it would help to have authorities who can say all the right things about why your art is better than other people's art, and so hence your art gets noticed. Excuse me. You need an audience. So beyond just a patron and authorities, you need people out there that actually may be interested in procuring your art that you've already done, or maybe art that you will do. And then you need a whole kind of raft of social conditions. So you need kind of artist community or artistic community that supports the fact that you think you'd be a great artist, or supports Da Vinci's whole conception of that this is an okay thing to do with the human life. Some of you might have run into this before when you talk to your parents about some incredible sense of what you want to be in your life, and they say nobody does that, or that's impossible to do, and you'll turn to some arcane magazine about woodworking. You want to be a woodworker, and you say, no, that's not true. There are people that can do this. There's a way that this can be done. And so you have something to point to legitimate this grand idea that you have. And in the social world, you have all sorts of places for exposure. So you have galleries, especially in Da Vinci's day, but in our day you have things like museums, or you have things like lofts where you can show off the stuff that you do. So Becker's point in saying, when having this phrase, art world, is that a single piece of art, like Da Vinci's great Mona Lisa, comes from an art world. And while the way that our society values art is to look at the artist, the piece of art, and think of the great genius idea, as sociologists interested in how culture is produced, we're aware of all these forces that have to come together, that have to be present for a piece of art to actually get produced. Now let me use another example that's maybe a little closer to home. Think for an example of a Hollywood star. Let's pick Jennifer Aniston. Well, let's go through some of this. Jennifer Aniston has to have some material in order to be a star, so she needs script writers. She needs people that actually make film and cameras and what she's filmed on. She needs settings. LA, there's lots of them here. I see shooting going on all the time, but she needs people that not only make sets, but she needs backgrounds of trees and cars and sunshine in order for the various shootings of her videos to happen. She needs training, so she needed some level of schooling, some ability to kind of be, to accrue the skills to be a good actress. A patron, well, lo and behold, you may not know this, but Jennifer Aniston is related to Telly Savalas. And if you know anything about the way almost any industry on the face of the earth works, it helps to be connected, to have inside connections. So Jennifer Aniston already had the door open for her. Sure, she had to show some desire and willingness to act, and noticeably, she also had to fit some image, a very friendly image of her physical appearance, in order to have the career that she had. If she was looked a different way in terms of race or body size, she may not have had the explosive commercial potential she's had. Those are all part of the social conditions that go into making this mysterious thing we call celebrity. So she had school, patron, she had a community of actors and actresses that she could be involved with. And then there's a market. We all know there's clearly a market. There's People magazine, there's TMZ that tells us what we should be thinking about and who's the best actor or actress out there today. And then there's an audience that's been produced over and over again by television studios, by movie studios, all sorts of stuff to make this thing that we know as Jennifer Aniston. Sure, there's a human in there somewhere, but clearly celebrity is, like the Mona Lisa, the center of a network of producers that actually allow that thing to become a piece of art. Now let me just mention here as I conclude this part about talking about art worlds, that this approach actually kind of has a curious effect too of, helping us to reveal or expose conditions that are often hidden, particularly in a globalizing economy. So if we think for a second about globalization, well, lots could be said. We could teach whole courses on that. But globalization is partly about securing resources, securing cheap labor, and also hiding both the literal financial costs, but also the social costs of making the cultural stuff that makes up our lives. I'm going to insert a slide right here. And in that slide, you can see a link to a wonderful radio show called This American Life that has all sorts of information, or has a show about what's known as the Foxconn factory. The Foxconn factory has been exposed as one of the main places in the whole world, it's in China, where electronics come from. It's in particular a huge supply of Apple's electronics. And what we see in that episode, if you have time to listen to it, it's really terrific. It's actually a comedian who loves Apple, who goes to China, goes to this Foxconn factory, and finds out that in order to produce this beautiful little device, in my case a Droid, takes all sorts of hidden labor that's in horrific conditions. It takes a government that's willing to allow labor to be in those conditions, and it takes all sorts of offlaying of, or externalizing of cost on the environment, on education, on water, on air, willingness to kind of externalize those costs and let those costs not be built into the product. Just let dirty environment happen, let dirty air happen, let people not be educated, because those are all part of a network of supply to produce this particular cultural object. So this Art Worlds approach actually helps us to be investigators too, and to understand the nature of our globalized economy a little bit better. Let me pause here and I'll be right back with the next segment.